I'm going to read a little excerpt.
Oh, yes. Yeah. There's something, I can't find it right now, so it's not meant to be. Yeah.
Oh. Terrific.
Yes, I know.
Well, as you know, today we're going to have a little session on you have no control over the world you made. I'm just going to read a little section from the course right now just to get us started off here. It says, the world you perceive is a world of separation. Perhaps you are willing to accept even death to deny your father. Yet he would not have it so, and so it is not so. You still cannot will against him, and that is why you have no control over the world that you made. It is not a world of will, because it is governed by the desire to be unlike God. And this desire is not will. The world you made is therefore totally chaotic, governed by arbitrary and senseless laws, and without meaning of any kind. For it is made out of what you do not want, projected from your mind because you are afraid of it. Yet this world is only in the mind of its maker, along with his real salvation. Do not believe it is outside of yourself, for only by recognizing where it is will you gain control over it. For you do have control over your mind, since the mind is the mechanism of decision. So really what I'm going to do today, I'm going to share a couple of experiences, and one really amazing experience that happened to me a few years ago back when I lived in British Columbia. And it was to show me with absolute clarity that I have no control over the world I made. And it was showing me symbolically from a vision that I was given in the mountains of British Columbia. Now, what happened one day was that I lived off the grid in British Columbia. No phone, no running water, no hydro. Actually, it was very wonderful. No indoor conveniences, the whole bit. And I had a nice deck that overlooked the valley. I could see like 60 miles down the valley. And it was just a beautiful place. And I was sitting on my deck one morning, reading A Course in Miracles. And the sky was absolutely clear blue. Like there was nothing, not a cloud in the sky anywhere. It was just absolutely gorgeous. And so I'm sitting there, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a black cloud. And I'm thinking, wow, where'd that come from? There wasn't, there was nothing else anywhere. But this cloud was moving in erratic ways. It wasn't just like floating sort of, it would make these little jogs in the sky because it was trying to get my attention. So it did get my attention because it was, sort of very unusual, right? And I'll set the scene for this because I was in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of a pine and tamarack forest. And it was the middle of summer, and the fire hazard was right up in the red, for forest fires. So I'm just setting the scene here a little bit. And as this cloud moved erratically, it did catch my attention, and it moved over this pine tree quite a ways from me. I had a little valley in front of my deck that looked across a little river, and on the other side was all these trees. Now the cloud stopped over a tree. It stopped and just stood there for a couple of minutes. And so I'm watching this cloud and I'm thinking, wow, this is crazy. Like there's no other cloud in the sky except this one black cloud. And all of a sudden, a bolt of lightning shot out of this cloud. And the pine tree below it burst into flames. And by now I'm thinking, wow, what's going on here, right? I have no phone. It's fire season. And here's all of a sudden this tree's on fire. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to jump in my truck and drive 4 or 5 miles down the road and let, the authorities know that they have to get up here to, to stop this forest fire from starting. And then out of the corner of my eye, again, I see another black cloud. And I'm thinking, wow, there's another one. And what's going on here? And that cloud that started the fire moved away. And this cloud did this erratic little movement and stopped over the pine tree. And it poured rain and put the fire out. This is a true story. If there's any true stories in this illusion, this is a true story. And I was sat there totally flabbergasted because 2 minutes later, both of those clouds disappeared and the sky was blue again. Now that was the Holy Spirit symbolizing for me that we have no control over the world we made. And it was a very clear and precise message. And if you can just sort of fathom that in your mind, how that could even happen, because it still blows me away to this day that, I was given that experience. And I was simply given that experience so that I could share it, to show people that we don't control anything here, not a thing. The only thing we have control over is our mind and how we perceive things. And that mind is outside of time and space. That's what the Course is always directing to when it's talking to you in the Course. It's talking to that mind, the decision maker. It's never addressing the figure in the dream, Lloyd or Stephanie. We're just figures in the dream. We're projections from a split mind. And these projections have no control over anything. And that's basically why the Course says, seek not to change the world, but only change your mind and how you see the world. Change your mind and how you see the world. And it's so important to understand that statement, because the main reason that we cannot change the world is because we're watching a movie that's already made. We're not making this up as we go along. We're viewing it mentally. That's what the Course means when it says you are viewing mentally that which has gone by. It also says we see only the past because the movie was over. Now, this all happened in an instant. The Course tells you that, there was this crazy mad idea, and then there was the answer, and they happened simultaneously. It was over in an instant. That's how long the world actually lasted, was an instant, because the answer was given. That tiny mad idea, you could say, would be, what would it be like to go off on our own and create a reality or a non-reality apart from God? That's pretty much what the crazy idea was. And God answered that in an instant in the world. Everything that this world has seen was played out in an instant. And we can't fathom that because it's beyond the capacity of the brain, number one, to even to go there. But what's happening here, if you can understand it, it all happened in an instant, and every lifetime happened in that instant. That's why there's really no such thing as reincarnation. It just appears that way because what happens is we keep viewing movies that are already made, lifetimes, lifetimes, and lifetimes. If we don't get it in this lifetime, we get to review another lifetime until we really get what the Course is trying to teach us, is to forgive. And that forgiveness, of course, is to forgive what never happened. We have to come to the conclusion that this is all a false perception and it's our own projection. And when I say our projection, I mean the mind, the split mind. Now, the split mind is not really split. It appears that way because it sort of fell asleep. But the split mind is still part of God, because ideas leave not their source. And even the part of the mind that thinks it's split off from God didn't really do it. It can't. We can't leave our source in God. It's an impossibility. He made us pure spirit, and we're eternal in his mind. But we can dream that we left, and that's what's happening to us here. We're really fell asleep at the wheel, you might say, and we just had a bad dream. I call it a nightmare sometimes. And the truth is that none of this dream is real. That's why the Course says you were dreaming a dream and none of its content is true. We've been caught. You might say the mind fell asleep and the ego convinced the mind that it had become a body. And we became thinking that as a body, this is the beginning and the end. We forgot that we had a mind that could make another choice. And that's what Jesus is doing for us through the Course in Miracles. He's reminding us, pardon the pun, that we have a decision-making mind that's outside of this dream, that can choose again and watch the movie, but watch it with the Holy Spirit and have it reinterpreted for us. And the Holy Spirit is always saying, what you're seeing is not true. You're home in God. You've never left your source. But in order to return to that state of mind, you must do the forgiveness work. And that's why, of course, again says, forgiveness is our only function. It says we have no other function but to forgive here. We don't need to do anything in the world. There's nothing to do in the world because it's already done. You may think that you're going to go out and save the whales or save the trees. There are no trees or whales to save. And that's a hard thing to understand at first, but it's true. As the Course says over and over, what you're seeing is not true. If you read lesson 132, it says there is no world, and it actually says, you know, all those things you see upon the world, like animals, etc. It says they're not here, and it says neither are you. And that's one of the turnaround points in A Course in Miracles is lesson 132, if you really get it. And it says many won't get it, and they shall return again, which means they'll return again and view another movie until they decide that they're eventually going to listen to the truth, which is saying, forgive what never happened. Now, I'd like to give you another experience that I had a number of years ago, where the Holy Spirit showed me that I don't see with these eyes. I was at an event down in Washington, D.C., actually. And there was archery involved. And it wasn't, it was like, you know, there, not a crossbow or anything, but just the old style of a bow and arrow. And there was about 300 people there, I guess. And they asked me to do a demonstration. I was familiar with archery a little bit because it was one of my hobbies at the time. But here's the trick. They set a target up 50 yards in the field, and then they blindfolded me. So I couldn't see the target. Now, this was an exercise that we were given by a teacher that I used to go to. And they blindfolded me, gave me 6 arrows. And they asked me, there was this lady, and we called her grandmother. And she said to me, I want you to focus on that target with your mind. And I want you to see that target in your mind. And then I want you to take an arrow and I want you to load the arrow and fire it at the target. Well, I took about 5 minutes and I went into a deep silence and I focused on that target. And I could see it in my mind's eye. I was totally blindfolded. There was no light. I was actually duct taped so that no light could get in. So I focused. I saw the target clearly in my mind. I took an arrow, put it in the bow. I drew the bow back and fired the arrow. Well, all of a sudden I heard the people in the background going, whoa, whoa. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, what does that mean? So grandmother says, okay, arrow number 2. I did the same thing, put the arrow in and I focused on that target in my mind, fired the arrow. Again, the crowd went, wow, whoa. And I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty interesting because I don't know what's going on, right? And anyway, I'm going to cut it short because I went through 6 arrows, all in the same procedure. And then the grandmother took my blindfold off. And by this time, the crowd was going a little crazy. I had hit the bullseye 6 times, blindfolded.
That's amazing.
So that taught me that what the Course is saying, that the eyes don't see. If anybody thinks that wasn't a great lesson, that was a fantastic lesson for me. So when the Course says that the eyes were made not to see, it's precisely true. Only the mind sees, only the mind thinks. The body doesn't even think. The brain doesn't think. The Course says quite clearly, the brain does not think. Only the mind thinks. The mind does everything. The mind, that mind, which thinks it's split, but it actually isn't, made this whole cosmos and all the cosmos beyond this cosmos. So when people say, you know, something about the ego being just a thought, it is just a thought, but it's a very, very powerful thought. And we can't dismiss it lightly. That's why this whole Course of Miracles is about undoing the ego. And the ego does not go lightly. I mean, it's our mind contains the power of God. And that mind can miscreate, which it did. It created a world of form. And as if you read the Course, especially on page 631, it says, God knows not form, which should tell you very clearly that God has nothing to do with this world. If he doesn't know anything about form, then how can he possibly know about a world of bodies? It's an impossibility. That's why the forgiveness process is so important, because we have to forgive our false projections of a world, and however they come up for us as we're doing it, that's where the forgiveness process comes in. Now I'll share a little bit more about how the script is written, and that it's a fixed script and we can't change it again. We have no control over the world we made. We cannot change the script. Many people would like to think they can, but it's an impossibility. But it's not a fixed script as far as choices go. There are millions of different choices within that script. And every choice that you make, though, has a script already ready to be played out for that choice. That's how it works, including there's two scripts going on. You have the Holy Spirit's alternative script. Now, what that script is, the Holy Spirit script, is simply reviewing the ego script and forgiving it. That's what the Holy Spirit script is. It's the alternative. It's the alternative, listening to the Holy Spirit who's saying to you, what you're seeing is simply not true. Just forgive it. But the forgiveness process is very important because that's the part that heals the mind. By forgiving your projections, that you're not a victim, because it's your projection. You forgive your projection and you forgive yourself for projecting it. And then the final process is what the Holy Spirit does, and he does the hard part. That part is really quite easy. But the Holy Spirit does the hard part, and he removes that from your mind. So you never have to deal with it again. And the more that you do that process, your mind starts to heal, and you'll feel it because you'll feel more at peace. And the more forgiveness you do, then the Holy Spirit works with your mind and can move you further along in your script so that it can actually remove many lessons that you no longer need to experience because you've done the forgiveness work. As a matter of fact, it says something, I think it says, if you can forgive one brother completely, then you've forgiven all brothers completely. But it's a process, and it takes practice and it takes perseverance to stay vigilant for God and his kingdom. And it, we don't arrive at the end result overnight. It can take years and lifetimes, actually. But I always think that if you're doing A Course in Miracles, that you're on one of your final lifetimes so that you get to go home. The course is a very powerful course, and it's a complete course. If you stick with it, you will see the results. I find people, they jump around too much, and they go to different teachings, and it just confuses their mind. I'm not talking about the body, it confuses the mind because it's getting different aspects of a reality that really isn't true, where the course sticks right to the fact that there is no world. That's what the course is teaching you, in that there is no physical world. And that takes a lot of practice because we like our individuality. And as the course says, there is no I in heaven. There is no individuality in heaven. And I've talked to a few course people and that know the course quite well. And that's the one part that really seems to bother them, is that there is no I in heaven. They think that there is individuality in heaven. And the only thing I can say to that is that I've experienced heaven. I was given an experience in 2003 where I was taken home and I had an experience of God directly. And it can't be explained in words because there are no words in heaven. But I'm going to tell you, everything the course is teaching us is the absolute truth. You can't go wrong if you stick to the course, even though you think nothing's happening.
Right.
I need you to trust that if you're doing the course and staying with it and doing what it's asking you to do, that the course is working for you. Even though it doesn't appear sometimes. Sometimes your life seems to be falling to pieces. And in a lot of cases, that's what happens. Because your life really does have to fall to pieces in order to rebuild it again. Because what we're thinking is true is simply not true in this world. It's a reversal of our thought system completely. Now, I'm gonna just share with you a couple of experiences that the Holy Spirit gave me and it still gives me today. I get them all the time, but show me how we are watching a movie that's over, that everything's already happened. And the Holy Spirit's actually, over the past 4 years, shown me, I would think, over 100 episodes of future events. Meaning I've been shown the event, and then within a few days, or sometimes even a couple of weeks, that event would take place, just the way that Jesus showed me in a vision. And I'm going to give you one here. I shared this, I think, last week with somebody, but it had to do with a motorcycle accident that I had. I was driving along the highway one day up around Norland, Ontario. And I'm driving along and I see this guy on a horse, riding a horse along the side of the road. And all of a sudden, the horse bolted up in the air and threw this guy off, but his foot got caught in the stirrup. And the horse, started to gallop along the side of the road, dragging this guy by the stirrup, bouncing him along, right? And I stopped my truck and jumped out of the truck to try and go and help this guy. But in the meantime, his foot came loose from the stirrup and he stood up and he was fine. He actually he'd been shaken up a little bit, but he wasn't hurt at all. And even the horse stopped and we managed to get the horse, and he said, I have to get right back on this horse, so I'm not afraid of riding, right? Which he did. And we talked for a couple of minutes and off he went. Well, the next day, I'm out riding my motorcycle. And I'm on a gravel road and I'm making a left-hand turn from one gravel road to another gravel road. And as I'm making a left-hand turn, the throttle on my motorcycle locked up. And I completely lost control of the motorcycle. And it dragged me, threw me off and dragged me along the ditch, and then turned upside down. And there I was. And instantly, I got the picture in my mind that Jesus had showed me the day before that this was going to happen to me. It was a picture of an event that was going to happen a little differently for me, but the same as what happened to that guy on the horse. He lost control of it. He was dragged through the ditch, but he was okay. And that was Jesus's way of showing me that I was going to have this accident, but I was going to be okay. And I did quite a bit of damage to the bike. There was about $600 damage to the bike. And even the master cylinder was broken. But I remembered also that the guy got back on the horse. And I thought, okay, I have to get back on this motorcycle and ride it home. Or I will be, afraid to get on this motorcycle again. And so I did. I got it up and I managed to get it back up on its wheels. And I saw that there was enough brake fluid left to get me home. And I got on the bike and rode it home. And then I immediately got that bike fixed and sold it because I had just started to ride. I'll just go a little bit further with the story. And I had purchased a bike. And I'm in my 60s now. I'd never ridden a bike before. And everybody thought, okay, this guy's crazy. Wants to ride a motorcycle, right? And anyway, I picked too big a bike. It was my ego. My ego saw this big bike with all the chrome on it. And I thought, oh, that's for me, baby. And because I had this accident, it was a sort of a wake me up call because I didn't have enough experience to have that size of a bike. And so Jesus prompted me to sell it, which I did. And I sold it to a friend. And I lost no money over the deal. And then he guided me to buy a smaller bike. And that was about 2 weeks later. And that bike was perfect for me, and I rode that bike for nearly 5 years before I bought a bigger bike that I now could ride because I had some experience. But that's how you sort of sometimes can get looked after by spirit, by listening. You know, I could have kept that bike and thought, I'll manage this, right? I'm just going to get up and go on this bike again. But what Jesus was trying to show me was that you took on too big a bike. You listened to your ego that said, you know, I can do this without any experience. I can ride a 1,000cc bike. No, it doesn't happen. Anyway, that was one thing that showed me like a future event. And let me look here. I wrote some things down here. Oh, all right. Here's another one. Here's a really good one. This house that we're in right now. I was going through a breakup in a relationship. And we had put in a request to move into this park. And I was on a list that was like about 2 years long. In other words, there wasn't a chance of hearing from this park for at least 2 years. It was quite a waiting list to get in. In the meantime, I was going through this separation, and I needed a place to live. And I get a phone call one day from this lady in the park here that said to me, we have a couple of houses coming available. Well, I was looking towards maybe even a newer type of house, but that didn't seem to be in the cards anyway. I wanted to just follow up because she'd been nice enough to call me. And I thought I'll come down and have a look. And so I came down and had a look. Now I'm just going to backtrack here for a minute so we can get the drift of the story. For a month, Jesus had been giving me visions of a sailing ship. And not like a modern sailing ship, but like an old type of, you know, pirate's ship, a galleon. And I kept getting this constantly. I kept getting this vision of a ship. And I thought, well, okay, well, I just, you know, when these things happen to me, I pay attention, but I had no idea what that meant whatsoever. So I decided that I'm coming down to look at this house. And I came down to look at it, and I thought, I wandered through, it was a disaster. I mean, it was completely wallpapered from one end to the other. It had shag carpet throughout. The woman had been a smoker that was in here. And it was like, Jesus Christ. I don't think this is a working in progress kind of thing. And you know, I stood there for a few minutes. I said, nah, this is not for me. And I walked out the door, and with the lady that owns the park. Oh, she said, just a minute, I have something to show you. And I went, oh, well, okay, what could that be? And she said, the owner left this here. She says, I had no idea why. And she holds up this model of a sailing ship. And I said, immediately, I'll buy the house. Just like that. Because I knew that I had been communicated from spirit, showing me that this was a house I was supposed to buy. And here's the ship. I don't know if you can see it.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. So that's how guidance can show up for you in the movie. If you pay attention, you become aware. And I've had so many things like that happen to me. I could write a book. It's just like amazing stuff when you become aware of how the Holy Spirit can speak to you. Everybody thinks they got to hear a voice. I never heard a voice for years. I just started to hear it recently. But the Holy Spirit always worked with me through symbols and inspired thought. is what worked for me for many years. And that was, that was a profound experience. Another time I was driving my school bus, and I would come to this intersection, and there was a sign on this intersection that said, I forget the name of the theater now, but it's not important, the name. It was a theater that I'd never heard of. And it was on this sign, and it said theater was 35 kilometers down this road somewhere. And 2 or 3 mornings in a row, for some reason, I got stuck at that stoplight. And my eyes always went to that sign that said this certain theater. And I thought, wow, what are you trying to tell me here? I don't get it. Because anyway, that went on for 3 or 4 days. Global Theater was called, Global Theater. And about 4 days later, my office calls me and says to me, we have a charter for you with 35 people that want to go to the Global Theater. And I went, okay. Because Jesus had showed me a future event again, had me focused on that sign. And then, of course, it showed up in a dream 3 or 4 days later. Yeah, I got it. One more. I just want to share one more experience to show you how things work with the Holy Spirit. This is another time I was driving my school bus, and I was on my way home actually, and I got this prompt. It's hard to explain, but it's like a prompt in the mind that told me to turn left and go down this road to a certain intersection. And I'd never been down that road before. And I always follow these prompts because they always work for me. So, I really pay attention. So I drove down this road, about a half a mile, I guess. And I came to this crossroads, this intersection. And it was like I was to stop there. I stopped, looked around at the area, and nothing happened. I thought, okay, whatever. I'll just go on home now. So I went on home. 2 days later, I get a phone call from my office, and they said, we have a new student for you. And here's the pickup. It's at this intersection. And guess what intersection that was? It was the intersection that Jesus took to me two days before. So this all goes along with, we have no control over the world we made.
And trust.
And trust. Because Jesus has showed me time and time again, everything that is going to happen has already happened. We're reviewing mentally that which has already gone by. So another thing is that if something is supposed to happen, you can't stop it from happening. And if something isn't meant to happen, there's nothing you can do to make it happen. Now, when you understand that you're watching a movie, that makes total sense after a while, because you cannot change the movie. You can only change your mind and how you see the movie. Look at it through the eyes of spirit. And by doing so, you can be guided within the movie. Now, the Holy Spirit never does anything in the world, and he never commands or never demands, but he can give you guidance to an inspired thought. He can save you time sometimes. He can take you to something that might have, for instance, to get something in a store, let's say. It's like that story about Helen when she bought the fur coat. Jesus took her right to the fur coat. And she would have got to that fur coat anyway, but he cut out a section of her dream where she went to 5 different stores. And I can tell you from my own experience, that's happened to me, where I've needed something, and rather than having to go and shop for it, Jesus has taken me directly there. It's cut out certain sections where I don't have to spend all this time looking for this thing. So there's another thing too. It's not that you can't have things in this world. because we do have things in this world. It's just not to be attached to them. And knowing that everything's happening for your benefit, no matter how we see it, everything is happening precisely, absolutely perfect. And the two thought system, one of the ego, one of the Holy Spirit, that's what makes the difference in your movie. Because you can be in the movie with the ego, or you can be in the movie with the Holy Spirit. One brings peace and one brings absolute chaos. All thought produces form on some level. Very important. I could go on for freaking hours, but I'm going to open it up here. If somebody wants to
Yeah, we're gonna,
ask
so
me some questions.
what we're
or-
gonna do right now, guys, let's just take a 2 or 3 minute break. If anyone, needs to do anything, use the washroom, have some water, whatever, I'd just like to do that, have a little intermission. And then we'll open up to any questions that you may possibly have. All right, so let's just put ourselves on mute and take a little break. We'll be back in 4 or 5 minutes.